All right. Good morning. I am so excited to be here. One, because of the view that's outside that window. That is a great change of pace from life in New York City. But I also appreciate that we have this intimate setting, a group of people who are sharing stories and ideas. It's just it's an honor for me to be able to speak with you guys and learn from you as well. Even the first two speakers today were beneficial for me. So thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. And thank you in advance for not judging my skills on the ski slope later. I want to talk a little bit about storytelling today as it pertains to Charity Water and give you a little bit of a sense of the types of stories we choose to tell and how we tell them and why. And I'm going to start where storytelling started for me, which was back home in Omaha, Nebraska. This is true today. On any holiday, any visit home, on any given Friday night, you will find everybody in my family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, gathered around the kitchen table, likely refilling wine glasses and wiping away tears of laughter as my sister retells the not possibly true story about the time she was carried across the street by an angel. For many years, I thought that the storyteller made the story. But as I've had the opportunity to hear more stories, I've gotten older, I've started to wonder if good stories and good storytellers are actually two different things. So we all know this person, the storyteller. They are charming and dynamic. They know just when to pause in a story. And should anybody interrupt, the group will audibly respond, no, let Nicole tell it, right? The storyteller is a gifted entertainer. They know how to make you feel, and they take you on a journey. There's actually a very real formula for telling stories this way. If you've taken creative writing class or any film classes, you're probably familiar with this. It's called the hero's journey, and I'll give you a quick run through. But basically, your main character is a future hero. They start off in an ordinary world, somewhere they're very familiar, and they get called into a quest. And they're going to go through trials and tribulations. It's something they cannot do alone. They will meet a guide or a mentor who's going to teach them something that is inevitably going to help them overcome this moment of truth. And then there's a turning point, and for better or for worse, they come back home forever changed. I'll give you two real-world examples. First is Luke Skywalker, just an ordinary guy living on a farm, and the galaxy becomes under oppression, and he's called into action. He meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's given a lightsaber. He's taught how to use the Force. Eventually, he helps defeat the Death Star and comes home forever changed. Another one that I like, Marlin is a normal father who's concerned about the well-being of his son Nemo, who's prone to wander and get into trouble. One day, Nemo disappears, and Marlin is suddenly called out into the ocean that he's not familiar with to go find his son. He meets Dory. She teaches him to just keep swimming. They navigate the ocean, encounter sharks and turtles. Eventually, they find Nemo and return home forever changed. You can do this hero guide formula over and over through all sorts of movies. You can look at this list and think hero guide, Shrek, Donkey, Frodo, Gandalf. But the really cool part is that it doesn't just apply to movies. The same formula works in political campaigns and advertising. Advertisers are actually some of the best storytellers, which is the reason that we drink Budweiser and buy crappy lunch meat for our children. But in each of these examples, these guys aren't acting as the hero. Donald Trump, for better or for worse, is trying to create a plan where he can guide us to a better future. Same with Jenny Craig and Mr. Mayhem here. They are guides who are prepared to usher you into a better way of life for yourself. Professional storytellers like this are salespeople. They're entertainers with an agenda. It might be trying to make you laugh or make you fall in love with a brand or inspire a purchase. And it's not a bad thing. Speaking for the nonprofit community, but I think it's probably true all over the place, we desperately need better storytellers. Nicholas Kristof actually has this great quote. In the New York Times, he says, "Toothpaste is peddled with far more sophistication than the life-saving work of aid groups." which is true and sad. And so the question is, in this crazy crowded space of professional storytellers and consumers who have the attention span of a fish named Dory, how are we supposed to show up? How do we even compete? Well, it starts with good stories. My job today is essentially a storyteller. I work at a nonprofit organization called Charity Water. I have the incredible privilege of traveling around the world to meet the communities that we serve and ask a ton of questions, learn about the impact of clean water, so I can come back and share those stories in hopes of inspiring future fundraisers or donors. But that wasn't always my job. For 8 years before that, I was the toothpaste peddler that Nicholas Kristof talked about. I didn't actually get the chance to sling toothpaste, but I came pretty close. This was a rap video spoof for children called Teach Me How to Brushy. It's for the Oregon Dental Association, which was just like full of souped up tricycles and gold chains about teeth brushing. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in my time in advertising and now in my 5 years at Charity Water is that we all have an incredible advantage that we're overlooking, which is the impact that our product has on our customers. We are connected to these human, real, powerful stories of change for the people we serve. Your product is not your story. Your story is rooted in the way that your product benefits the people who use it. So what makes a good story? How do you find a good story? I am not an expert, but I've learned a handful of things. I want to share 5 of them with you today, and these are all rooted in Charity Water stories from the past 5 years. The first is that good stories have more faces than facts. I think this is probably true for any line of work, but certainly in the nonprofit world, we love numbers, statistics, data, and a lot of people are clinging to the numbers like those are your proof points. And it's true, but look at some of these: 16,000 lives, 24,000 water projects. The most important one for us is in the middle of the screen. 663 million people is the number of people who lack access to clean water, but that number is almost impossible to imagine until you can tie a human story to it and start to make one person in that number real. A couple years ago, I had the chance to go to a country called Niger in West Africa, and I got to meet this woman, Aissa Maru. Aissa lives in one of the hottest places I've ever been in my life. It was 115 degrees when we were there. Niger is basically just below the Sahara Desert. So during the day, there's no escape from the sun other than your small home. But for women and children, you are walking through the hot sand to a water source to collect water for your family. This water source is a 1,000-year-old hole in the ground. And what's worse is how demanding, physically demanding it is to collect the water. So women and children in particular are collecting water by rope. You lower a bag down into the well, fill the bag, pull it back up with the rope, pour it in your bucket, and you repeat. And you can see the grooves in this log have actually been sawed over the course of a month by the rope. So you can imagine if that's what the rope is doing to the log, what it's doing to people's hands. Women showed us hands that were calloused and scarred from years of collecting water. Aissa's story, she's had 10 children, only 2 of them have survived. So that's a testament to the climate. She was collecting water one day with her baby on her back. This was years ago. And leaned forward to pull the rope, and her baby kicked, and just the weight distribution threw her forward over the log down into the well. She was all by herself. She hit her shoulder on the way down and broke her collarbone and was down in the water, treading water, trying to hold her child in the air, hoping that at least somebody would rescue her baby. She cried for help. Eventually, fortunately, somebody came and they were able to rescue both of them. But it didn't change the fact that Aissa would still have to come back to this water source to face that fear and that moment over and over again because her life revolved around it. So when I think of the 663 million number, I think of Aissa as 1. I think of her daughter as 2. And I think of her community as 550. Now, you start to get a sense of how big the number is. Even if you still can't fathom it, that 550 is real. The truth is that we rarely remember the numbers, but we always remember the images. I'll give you a few examples. Each of these that just takes you back to a moment or a place in your own history. It's about faces more than it's about facts. The second takeaway is that good stories remind you of something or someone. About a year and a half ago, we do an annual gala, typically in New York City. So we had it at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We had invited 400 of our biggest supporters to come be a part of this night. And we surprised them by giving them each a unique story. We went to a community in Ethiopia. We interviewed 407 people, everybody over the age of 4, so that everybody in attendance could sit down and read or experience a different story, a video portrait of this person looking back at you, what makes them special. And then we gave everybody the opportunity to donate $30 and bring clean water to that person. And then in anticipation of their generosity, we had actually sent a drilling rig into the community. So it's 10 p.m. at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's 6 a.m. in this community, Adi Itot, on the other side of the planet. We drill in real time, and everybody gets to watch clean water shoot out of the ground. It was amazing, and I don't mean to rush past that story, but the real story came for me months prior when we were in the community. On the very first day, when we go into a community, there's usually a welcome ceremony where we get to explain our purpose, what we're capturing, how we're going to use it, how it will benefit this community or other communities. We get to ask questions, they get to ask questions. It's just like a good moment of bonding. And on day one, this man here, Gebre Hiwat, was present, and he winked at me. And in that moment, between the wink and the beard, I was like, I need to know this man. I feel like I always have someone in mind that I want to connect with. But early on, we found Gebre Hiwat at one of the water sources. It's like a little dried up ravine. He's really just a social butterfly at this point. He's too old to work, so he just likes to go where the action is, and he was everywhere that we went. But he invited us to his house for coffee. And so we went, and we got to sit with him and his wife and hear about what 74 years of life without clean water have looked like, how he's seen things change for the people around him, the kids in particular, and what clean water would mean to this community. The next day, I was off by myself taking photos, and I ran into Gebre Hiwat again. I didn't have a translator with me this time, but he motioned, he's like, coffee, motioning coffee. And my philosophy in the field is that you say yes to everything. I'm really there as a representative of the people who give to Charity Water. So this story is really their story. I'm in. So I follow him up the hill like a billy goat. He shows me a small garden where he's growing little peppers and tomatoes, and then takes me back to his house where he and his wife and his son and I have not one coffee, but 3 coffees. Eventually we share a meal together. And I sit with him for 45 minutes, and we cannot communicate. There's nothing that we have other than just like the motions and the understanding that like I'm talking out loud, he's talking out loud, and there's a wall. But we're just laughing and having a good time. And it's in this moment that I get to see his character. It's the way that he treats his wife, his son, the way he treats me as a guest. And there's something about him that reminds me of my late grandfather. So I go back. At the end of the day, we all regroup, and I'm telling the story to my coworkers, and everybody had a similar story, somebody that they had met who reminded them of someone they knew. And we realized that this is so much bigger than the gala. We need to be able to create this personal experience for anyone. Like, there's something for everyone in this community. So for World Water Day last year, we created a quiz. It's called Someone Like You. You can go to charitywater.org/someonelikeyu if you want to play with this yourself. But I think it would have been very tempting to make the quiz more demographic based. How old are you? What gender do you identify with? Just like some on-the-nose pieces and then give you the person who, yeah, like on paper is probably the most like you. But that wasn't how the story began for us. The story began for us in the thing that made this person have a lot of character. So the quiz starts with how old are you? And then it builds into how do you like to spend your time? You get to choose a handful of these. And then the only other question is what do you value most in life? And based on that information, we pair you with someone in this community who is most like you in here, right? And you get to read their story and see the similarities. This person may also have kids. They may also be saving for a wedding. They might also be trying to pay off some debt or going through a divorce. They might be future entrepreneurs or excited about their kids going to school. It's like all things that we can identify with. Every single person had a different story that was so much bigger than how their life is tied to dirty water. So all of this was well received. Our World Water Day campaign was a big hit, but the thing that we heard more than anything else was not that it was cool to be connected with your own person. It was cool to get to see the real life of somebody so far away. And that relatability eliminated the distance between us and what's happening on the other side of the planet, something that often feels very far away and very unrelatable. The relatability made it feel very close and very important. This third takeaway is that good stories are part head and part heart. This past year we went to a community in Nepal who got access to clean water a couple years ago, and we had heard stories about this dramatic change in the health of the community. So we wanted to go see for ourselves and create a story out of these numbers. This community apparently has been tracking for decades. So we essentially went to this health clinic and audited them. They brought out stacks and stacks of books like this. And as a result, my notebook was full of numbers like this. So I can tell you that in 2012, at the height of the problem, this community saw 6,433 diarrhea cases. I bet you didn't think we were going to talk about diarrhea today. Also, where does that fall in the SEO, guys? 6,433. Today, it's down to 182. At the height of the problem, the doctor was seeing 700 patients per month, and today the average is closer to 60. Those numbers are impressive. Anybody can tell you, any logical person is like, yeah, that's what an incredible difference. But until you root those numbers in something more emotional, they don't mean as much, right? We spent time with this doctor, Dr. Ram, who's been in this community for 18 years, has seen this change in the progress that's come as a result, and he's so proud, truly proud of his own work, but also proud of the progress of the community and the way that they've embraced sanitation and hygiene. But he took us around the community and introduced us. He actually lined up children at one point. He was like, I delivered this one, I delivered this one, I delivered this one. But he took us to see both sides of the story. He introduced us to a woman named Sanjita, who a couple years ago almost lost one of her two children. Her 5-year-old boy woke up in the middle of the night convulsing. He was dying from dehydration caused by diarrhea. And they were able to save his life, but it was close. And he shared stories of the other side when it didn't work out. But he introduced us to kids who will proudly demonstrate how to wash your hands or properly brush your teeth, kids who are happier and healthier because of clean water, and kids who have more time to go to school now and get to focus on their future and dream of better futures, dream of becoming doctors and engineers and social workers and pilots. But it's that network, right? All of those stories together that make that number change, the 700 down to 60, so much more impressive. It's the combination of head and heart. This fourth is the good stories give context. This was one of my first trips with Charity Water. We went to Cambodia. And in rural Cambodia, everybody has access to water. There are ponds and rivers and rice fields. Water's everywhere, but the water looks like this glass on the left. And really, there's not a lot of solutions. It's hard to drill in Cambodia because the water table is high, so putting drilled wells isn't a great solution. One of the solutions that we've found that our local partner provides is called a biosand filter. This is not a great photo, I'm sorry. The solution is actually not sexy, period. It's this concrete box, and inside are layers of sand and gravel and microbacteria that automatically forms that will take the water on the left, you pour that into the top, and the water on the right comes out the bottom. Really incredible. And for my first trip, I was floored. I was like, this is our story, pack it up. But I was wrong, because we still didn't know the value of water until we met this woman whose name is Kuhn Leap. Kuhn has lived in this community her entire life. She has a biosand filter today, but before she did, she had the well that you can kind of see behind her here. It's a well that she paid $1,000 to line with cement because somebody told her that it would make her family healthy. This is still an unprotected source. That wasn't true. Her family didn't get healthy. But $1,000, it's a ton of money, right? Is it? I mean, it depends on the context. If she's making $50,000 a year, maybe it's not that much money. If she's making $1,000 a year, her entire annual income, yeah, that is a big deal. Well, what if I told you that Kuhn Leap is earning $480 a year? And she has 4 kids, that her husband is too sick to work, so she is the sole provider for her family. She works in a rice field during the day, and then she comes back home and does odd jobs in the community to try to earn extra food or little handouts for her family. Now, that context means the world, right? Kuhn Leap was willing to take on 8 years, a lifetime of debt, to make her family healthy again. You could juxtapose that with the fact that a biosand filter costs $65, something that Kuhn Leap valued at $1,000. And who in this room wouldn't give me $65 right now to go build a biosand filter at this woman's house? Every one of us would. But that context is so important. If you go back to the hero's journey, Kuhn Leap is the hero in this story, but she is in search of a guide. She needs somebody to give her a plan that's going to get her to the other side. This last takeaway is that good stories empower people to take action. I think this is something Charity Water does so well. And for us, at a larger level, it's about choosing to focus on hope instead of guilt. We want to provide an opportunity for our audience to make a difference. We want them to feel powerful, not powerless. And you won't see any social media post from Charity Water that isn't trying to get you to click a like button, right? There's like a certain intentionality behind that. But knowing the intended action for your audience is really important, and I think that's a piece that a lot of people miss. It's really one of the things that advertisers do so well. One of the things that I learned right away is that the intended action can be more action. That you can give your story away, let your audience own it, make it their own, share it in their own creative ways. I saw it on day one at Charity Water, hearing stories about Sarah Peck, who is in the middle here. She agreed to swim naked from San Francisco Bay to Alcatraz if she could raise $30,000 for clean water. She did it. The Six Summits bike crew who biked through the mountains for days. Little Cassette, who has been, since the age of 4, has been painting and selling her paintings to raise money for clean water. We actually have built fundraising campaigns around this, trying to embrace the idea that nothing you can do is too crazy. We actually have a huge wall in our office that says nothing is crazy. And it's a place where fundraisers can come list what they're doing to raise money for clean water. It's like a badge of honor. I'm doing this. I'm jumping rope. I'm eating hot sauce. I'm walking to work every day. Because the reality is that Maddie and her lemonade stand are going to inspire an audience in a way that we can't. Jen Renton and the tote bags that she's selling are going to reach an audience that we don't have access to. And little Noah, who's going around to classrooms and speaking about the water crisis, is going to talk to kids in a way that we don't know how to. That's one of my favorite parts of being at Charity Water, is constantly being inspired by the ways people have turned our story into their story. It's not just individuals, it's also brands. We work with a group called Smile Generation, who have dental offices across the country. They've made Charity Water a foundational point in their dental office, shared it with their entire audience, and run fundraising campaigns of their own. For years, they've raised several $1 million. Loci, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Loci. It's a little wristband bracelet thing. But they created a messaging bot that would allow you to talk with a young girl in Ethiopia, not a real person, but rooted in an actual story, so you could get a sense of what her life is like without access to clean water. We have partners like Nautica, who have brought virtual reality, our virtual reality story, into their stores to share with their audience. They do a lot of point-of-sale stuff at the counter, so just little bits of change at a time, and have helped thousands of people around the world. Caterpillar is another good one. They host major conferences and will do water walks where people get to experience what it's like to carry a jerry can, which is about 40 pounds of water, what most people are using to collect water in developing countries around the world. And this is probably my favorite example. Emergency last year did a 40-pound challenge where they asked their audience to take a picture of themselves holding Emergency and 40 pounds of anything to get a sense of what it's like to carry water. But you start to see how by giving our story away, it becomes somebody else's story. And then they give it away and it becomes somebody else's story. Our story became Emergencies, it became their audiences, and it became their audiences. It's the best, most powerful tool that you can use. So those are the big ones for me. If you can tell stories that are relatable, that are rooted in faces, that give great context, that tie into emotion, right? And that are actionable, empower an audience to take action, you will be telling better stories. And the rest, as my sister will surely tell you, is just storytelling. Thank you, guys. We've got some time left. If anybody has questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Stunned them. No? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That was great.
Yeah.
Who does your photography? You're obviously shooting and doing interviews. Who's taking more of the advertising type photography, which is really great and you connect that too?
Yeah, every time, the question was around photography. Every time we travel to the field, we bring a pretty small, a lean team. We often bring a freelance photographer and a freelance videographer. And we just have a group of people that we go to on a regular basis. But it's another important note that a lot of people feel like, yeah, who wouldn't love to tell great stories, but I don't have the resources. But I think you have to prioritize it. It has to be an investment. And you have to know how to prove the value of it, even if it's one story at a time, so you can validate bringing a photographer to the field, replicate it again and again, and just make it a bigger and bigger priority. Is there another one over here? Yes, sir.
How do you prioritize where you go and who you try to help, especially because it seems like I just learned, drilling doesn't work in Cambodia. So how do you figure that out? Make sure that the people that need it most are getting it first.
It is, yeah, it's tricky. We have an entire team that's dedicated to, so Charity Water is largely a fundraising organization, and then we grant that money out to local partners who are much better prepared to provide sustainable solutions in their country. I can't show up and dig a well. I have no experience digging wells, but what I can do is tell stories and raise money. So we work with local partners around the world. The way that we choose the countries where we work, it's almost like if you take a map of the world and mark every single country that's in the lower part of the Human Development Index, which measures like quality of life and opportunity to earn income, lifespan, all kinds of things. You take those countries and then you remove any place that is a conflict zone or has an unstable government, somewhere that the solution may not be sustainable. And we just slowly whittle the list down further and further till you're looking at places where there's the most need and the most opportunity. And it's probably 30 to 40 countries for us that we're looking at. But it's an exciting problem also as we continue to solve the water crisis. It's gone from 1.1 billion since I started down to 663 million. Plenty of people trying to solve this problem, and we really believe that we will solve it in our lifetime. But the problem will get harder. Infrastructure, finding ways to get pipes to people who have no roads, right? Or working in places where water could easily cause a war. It'll be really interesting. Yeah.
So, and I followed Charity Water on Facebook for a long time, and I get served up your founder's video often. So, my question is, what medium has been most effective for you when it comes to actually coming through to donations that are given? I'm guessing on the site, but what do you find is most effective?
Yeah, we have just, I would say 2 years ago, started to invest in marketing. For 3 of my years at Charity Water, we had $0 marketing budget. So pretty scrappy. But as we've invested, we've learned a lot. And it's primarily Facebook ads and Google ads for us. We pushed the video, the spring video, which is like a 20-minute video, our founder story, sort of the beginning of Charity Water. It's an amazing film, but a tall ask to try to serve in an ad, like, hey, sit down and watch this 20-minute film. But the ultimate goal for us is to get people to join our monthly giving program, which is long-term more valuable than any one-time donation. And I think there are a couple pieces that make it valuable. One is that we think of our monthly giving program not as a passive gift. It is a subscription. You have this suite of products that you subscribe to in your life that are all for you, right? You have Spotify and Netflix, and $10, $15, $4 goes out of your account every single month, and you don't miss a beat. We wanted to create a product that operates in the same way, but it's for somebody else. So there is a certain level of value exchange. We're working on a unique content series that is exclusively for that group, and so there's a little bit of like acquisition that happens in like the perceived value of the program. The Facebook ads that we've been serving up, though, have skyrocketed to an 8-to-1 conversion. It's crazy, and I still don't understand how we're doing it. We have like a demand gen person who just comes to a meeting and reports numbers, and we're all like, what? When will it stop? But yeah, that's been the hugest piece for us. That answered the question. That's okay. Yes.
So this was a great lesson in storytelling. Is there any other resources, books, or people that you recommend that inspired you, that taught you, or the rest of the team at Charity Water, you mentioned growing us in terms of storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, Seth Godin is a great one. You guys were very lucky to have him yesterday, and I'm so mad that I missed it. Gary Vaynerchuk is a good, just like a natural hustler and a good, honest interpreter of what works and what doesn't. And he's very straightforward. I feel like we learn a lot from him. And Donald Miller runs an organization called StoryBrand and talks a little bit about sort of a version of the hero's journey in the way you tell story, more of like the arc, and how it relates to marketers more than movie producers. But those are both good ones. Last call. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you joined up with Charity Water, you kind of talked about you didn't really have a big budget for creating content. So how do you inspire that want, I guess, and that need into others in the organization to say, hey, let's create these stories and let's share them, and they will make an impact? How did you inspire that?
Oh, that's a great question. The question is around how, like, establishing buy-in from the people around you. We're very lucky because our founder is a natural entrepreneur and gets it. I think the creative director was the second or the third hire that he made, and it's been a priority for the brand from the beginning, and there's automatically respect for it. He's always the person who has an idea that makes everybody nervous, and his ideas often work. And when you're able to prove it like that, it's hard to argue. For us, that's what it comes down to. It's a small anecdote about one VR film inspiring somebody to come back to the org and say, I want to empower you guys to make more content like that. I'm going to give you $250,000. Like, well, that's good proof. We're on the right track. But it's little moments, and I think you have to be really good at surfacing them, finding like ways to get your entire team to recognize those wins. And we have all kinds of internal places, Slack channels and emails that go out once a week where we talk about those wins so people continue to feel invested in the stories that we're telling and the value of them. All right. Well, you guys can reach out if you have other questions. I'm happy to answer more.